arrived and somebody had complained. Now, a slightly different approach, the one that is not built out of pellets, a bit more serious approach, which might influence the well-being of courtyards. This was a very interesting translation into Latvian of the concept of well-being. But the speaker is going to be Ligita Brege, and currently she is the master program student of design at the design department. Good afternoon. My name is Ligita Brege, and yes, I represent the Environmental Arts Department at the Academy of Arts, and I am the second-year student at the master's program. I would like to tell you about the design solutions and how they could influence the well-being of inhabitants in micro-districts of Riga. This is a very matter that is so close to my heart because I started working on it during my bachelor studies, and I'm continuing working on it during the course of my master studies. Let us begin with this image. What you can see here is that we have the original principle of shaping these spacious green zones that are surrounded by block type of houses. And the situation in Riga currently is as follows. There are these vast, wide zones, square types, square areas with some greenery, and mostly they serve as parking lots. Then you have these pocket roads, which are also used as parking lots. And there is a great disbalance in the scaling, which contributes to the generating the feeling of depression and distance. Now we have arrived at the state of starting to think of what to do with these micro-districts. Because up to now we had actually ignored them. This certainly, for all of us, is related with some unpleasant memories or maybe some experiences related to unsuccessful experiments and unpleasant feelings. But many inhabitants of Riga, the vast majority of the population of Riga, lives in such buildings. These buildings deteriorate. They destroy slowly, and the entire environment deteriorates accordingly. The current situation is as follows. Courtyards are used mostly as parking lots, and originally they were not anticipated for such functions. The modern motorized vehicles are parked wherever it is possible, on the lawn, and sometimes in the greenery beds. And the biggest problem is the fact that the zone is not functionally used up. It is empty, it is impersonal, it lacks amenity elements such as benches. Maybe they have some remainders of amenity elements or landscaping elements that were set up a long time ago, but still no longer function as such, and this deteriorates the environment. And if we think about courtyards and streets as conceptions, then courtyards might seem a private space, whereas streets might seem to be public space. And in this regard, I think that these internal blocks are semi-public and semi-private space where the inhabitants shape their own dwelling space. This is their closest or nearest proximity space that surrounds their apartments. And this public is this area is what shapes this feeling of privacy. The environment, however, does not provide this privacy. It lacks this image or this feeling of privacy, this feeling of humanity, because people tend to use this space as a transit zone. Thus, we arrive at the conclusion that the people have a sort of separated themselves from the society. They have no opportunity to meet any longer. They simply pass each other by on a daily basis. So the task might be that we have to develop these areas, these spaces, which are semi-public, semi-private. These should serve as recreational areas which could influence positively the emotional and psychological and social processes. Here you see one example of a children's playground, which could serve as a place for meeting. This is the activity zone where parents and their children meet. These areas contribute to the mutual communication. Children find friends there. Their parents find likely-minded people there. So this serves as a platform for communication to some extent. But this meeting point doesn't seem that public anymore because the people who are there are, their own people, one of them. Such children's playgrounds and sports grounds are not solutions, however, which could contribute to the development of positive communication because they support only a narrow range of activities and a small target group, because these micro-districts are places of residence with people who have various interests and various needs. So I could outline various target groups. For example, small children, adolescents and youth, grown-ups, seniors, as well as people with special needs. And I think that the situation is such that the amenities and landscaping does not provide all of the groups with the things that are necessary for all of them. They only facilitate some of the groups. This immediately puts the other groups in a somewhat an isolated position. Thus, communication doesn't evolve to the extent that it would be desirable, and children's playgrounds are sometimes demolished just because the other social groups are simply envious. Or this can sometimes serve as a campaign of protest because the other groups, for example, adolescents, the young youth representatives, are not welcome in this space. That's why they come at nights and simply destroy the whole thing. People, as a result, start losing their personal communication skills. One reason for that certainly is the development of various technologies and the popularity of various social portals and social media. But another problem is poor environmental design. Somehow it has turned out to be that people have no longer places to meet. There are shopping centers, there are some specific activity zones in place, but that's about it. The various target groups have not sufficient possibilities to exchange communication. The elderly people who do not use new technologies to such a degree as other groups, they still continue using the outdoor space in order to keep up their communication with their, say, neighbors and exchange thought. That's why one might ask a question. So how do we shape an environment which could contribute to the development of mutual communication? Then the answer might be as follows. The outer environments, to some extent, determines our inner environment. And this highlights a topical problem because the pace of life is so quick, so rapid that people are no longer capable of attributing their emotional ties to a certain place, and that's why they grow distant from them. The only linking point is their apartment or the building that they live in. So the task of design in this case might be as follows. People should be made happy and satisfied in the environment that they live in without isolating one person from another or one group from another. People have to be facilitated as social beings, and this in turn could facilitate the sense of well-being. This concept of well-being is not related to some kind of a material state. Instead, it is related to an emotional or psychological state of being well. A person is satisfied, content, and feels well. And particularly, these processes play a great role in the feeling of well-being. Belonging, the sense of belonging to something also contributes to this, and this entails the fact that a person starts to identify him or herself as a part of a participant of a society and starts to adopt some certain ways or models of conduct, and thus start to contribute to the society without asking or expecting anything back. And as for the social processes, they also provide this internal psychological balance for a person. In order to facilitate these senses, these feelings, it is important to facilitate this reciprocity of human communications. I could call it the application of social rituals, so to say, because the first level of affiliation is the level of rituals, as we know. This is also important, particularly in terms of physical presence, because proximity enables people to exchange pleasantries, greet each other, and so on and so forth. That would be all. And what you see here is a scheme of how a community could interact. Individuals come together and they communicate. As for the solutions, we know that deteriorated places seem threatening to people because it seems that crime takes place there, and that's why people don't really want to be present in these courtyards. They simply want to pass through them as quickly as possible and leave. That's why there's no communicative networking in place between these courtyards, and this free space is impersonal. These images are my observations in public space where various objects are located. In one case, this is a sculpture that I'm talking about. In another, this might simply be an old piece of wood. However, people like to interact with these objects in a creative way. And I think that according to these types of principles, in an innovative way, people could select the functions of elements themselves. We wouldn't have to tell them what it is or it isn't. And out of examples that we have acquired from abroad, I could mention the various elements that are in place.
So according to experience elsewhere in the world, it's very important to create an urban design, allowing people to interact, be active, socialize, and quite often it may be achieved by using various plastic installations like rhythm line, tectonics, and light and shadow interplay, and so on and so forth. All these things attract people, and they start interacting with these items, design items, and then the design item sort of starts interacting or living on its own and attracting other people and interacting with them. And society has changed nowadays compared to previous times, so the functions of these residential areas are no longer relevant. In a similar way, we've changed our perception of what a workplace should be. We know what Facebook, Google offices look like, and I think that courtyards may also be some kind of platform for creative activities, or having at least creative various items and objects, allowing people to come up with their own interpretation of what that is. Universal design, of course, is also very important in this context, because a courtyard or a yard, is the nearest place where you can go. And for older people and people with disabilities, this environment that you can find if you go out the door is very important. And without, creating immense structures, you can achieve that. You can even place neutral objects there as well. And if I may, I'd like to propose, and we should have an interdisciplinary, some kind of working group or workshop on that. But what I propose is to have recreational areas that are openly accessible for all groups, so that these groups could interact and could use these recreation areas so that social rituals can be furthered.
Paldies, Ligita. Es domāju, ļoti veikli ievadīt tēmu par to, kā
Thank you, Ligita. You introduced wonderfully how space determines our behavior from a social point of view. And to have these social rituals, we must also establish clear rules of conduct. And by a large extent, these rules are imposed by the environment in which we operate. We concluded at the end of the previous session that there's enough space between the buildings, and it is a space that is publicly accessible, open to the general public. But